Hey, welcome to Behind the Curtain. I'm Nehemiah Jordan, and today's a special episode of Behind the Curtain. I got to interview Dave Franco about his new film that he directed and co-wrote called The Rental, which came out July 24th in select drive-ins, theaters, and on demand. So I got to talk to him about the writing process, working with Joe Swanberg, a little bit how he wrote this sort of genre film, what it was like just doing this for the first time. After the interview, I'm going to share a little bit of my thoughts about what I thought about the film, whether or not it worked or not. But first, just let's listen to the creator and learn what he was aiming to do and how he did it. Enjoy. So most people know you from your acting career, and I'm curious about how your experience acting potentially helped you in the writing process with like character development or even like dialogue, for instance. Do you think you were able to transfer that in a way?
That's interesting. So this movie is technically a thriller or a horror film, but it's not really how me and my co-writer Joe Swanberg see it. It's like the reason I wanted to work with Joe in the first place is because his main strengths lie in character and relationships, and so our goal from the beginning was to create a tense relationship drama where the interpersonal issues between the characters were just as thrilling as the fact that there's a psycho villain lurking in the shadows. And so at its core, it really is about these characters. And we use the horror elements to kind of sprinkle on top to just help accentuate the problems that they're going through. And I think, going back to the question, it's like, I think I wanted to make a film where the acting was front and center, and where I could really work with actors and get great performances out of them. And as opposed to a lot of these kind of genre films that have these two-dimensional kind of prototype disposable characters, we wanted to have these more complex characters that you feel invested in and that you actually get to know. So by the time everything starts going crazy, you care whether or not they live or die.
Right. Okay. And I see that because, when you hear like Joe Swanberg writing this like horror, like thriller, that's kind of surprising because he is much more focused on writing. Like his films are much more like character based.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, I can talk about Joe and just his writing process in general, where, this was his first kind of standard screenplay, where his normal technique is he writes a very, very detailed outline, and then the actors just improvise all of the dialogue. And then for me, I had written maybe two feature-length screenplays before this one, but neither of them saw the light of day for a good reason. But I guess this is a way of saying, like, neither of us are professional screenwriters in any right. But for whatever reason, when we came together, it just it all came out of us, and we got it down on the page pretty quickly.
And talk about that a little bit as far as the writing process, writing with Joe. You're talking about story. Are you sitting when you're actually going to write a draft of this? How did you approach that with each other?
Yeah, so Joe lives in Chicago and I live in LA. And so we actually outlined over the phone for a few months before we ever met up in person.
Gotcha.
And once we felt good about the outline, he flew out to LA, and we basically holed up in his hotel for like 2 weeks. and like, from first moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed, we were writing, just knowing that we had this finite amount of time to work together in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
And, what was the process? We would sit across the room from each other and just kind of each tackle a different scene at the same time, and then just start passing it back and forth. And what I love about Joe is, sorry, got some good timed voice cracks on this one. Let me get some water real quick.
You're good.
What I love about Joe is he has no ego, and he really is an idea guy. And so for the most part, you know, he would just kind of rattle off a ton of different ideas, and I would latch on to one and be like, yes, let me run with that. And it was such a fun experience, because I feel like it's harder to find a writing partner that you work with. I feel like it's harder to find that than it is to find a romantic partner. And so the fact that we gelled so well, it's very rare, and I hope to continue to write with him.
Well, it seems like there's a lot of value with that, because I know that it's difficult to sort of do that, throwing around ideas by yourself.
Yes. It's just not as fun. You know, I've tried writing things on my own, and what ends up happening is, you know, I'll just force my wife to just continue to read draft after draft. And it's like, I'm trying to pull her into the process, even though she's not technically writing it with me. But you just start to get in your own head if you're just kind of just on this island by yourself. And so I am a big proponent of just kind of like reaching out to people that you trust and just trying to find those collaborations that actually work.
Yeah. Do you remember, in as much detail as you want to share, do you remember what some of those major problems were in those first few drafts, and like how you kind of tackled them?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, without giving away too much in the film, there were iterations of the script where our main villain was like basically monologuing about why they were doing what they were doing. And even as we were writing it, we knew that it felt a little preachy and a little cheap, and just kind of, we just knew it wasn't right. And so we stripped away all of that and made it all a little bit more ambiguous, which ultimately we felt was, you know, more in line with the tone of the movie, but also scarier. And it's hard to even elaborate on that without giving even more away. But let me just try to think of even like the earlier problems too. I mean, one of the biggest things that, I guess one of our biggest challenges was the tone. You know, it's like I was saying, it's this relationship drama that kind of transforms and becomes somewhat of a horror film. But the whole way through, we wanted there to be this underlying tension that's like slowly building. And so even in scenes where there's nothing overtly scary happening, we needed there to still be tension. And so, you know, I guess one thing that we were aware of was in like the first half of the script, we added moments of just voyeurism where we basically just wanted to remind the audience, like, hey, yeah, you're essentially watching this relationship drama, but maybe there's this extra element and maybe this outside force that is slowly creeping in, and it just will hopefully put the audience we'll put them out of their comfort zone and make them uneasy.
Right. In an interview with Dan Stevens, he mentioned briefly talking with you about kind of playing with archetypes with these different characters. Can you talk a little bit about how you kind of approach that, either in the writing or as you were directing the actors?
Yeah. So like I was saying earlier, like we didn't want to create a horror film with all these characters that we've seen a million times, you know, the handsome jock or the kind of like girl next door virgin or anything like that. We wanted all these characters to be flawed. You know, they're all good people, but they are flawed, and it just makes them a little more real and relatable. And I guess just thinking about some of them specifically, like, you know, Allison's character, on the surface, she's like the type A wife character who is a little more reserved, but you know, we wanted her character to have more fun. And so she's the person who actually brought the drugs, and she wants to let loose. And maybe she's a little lame, but like, she's not just one thing. And so we try to do that with all of the different characters. And I worked with the actors to find some of those nuances too. One thing I did that I will do with every movie that I direct is I did a table read with just me and the actors, and we went through each scene, and I would just ask them, are there any lines of dialogue or even any single words that feel unnatural for you to say? And so what it did was we started to put everything into their own words, but it really gave them ownership of these characters. And so they started to just feel comfortable with what they were doing. These characters started to feel very lived in even before we started filming anything.
Right. And I was actually that's one thing I was gonna ask you, this being your directorial debut and, first big screenplay, what were some of those like other big lessons that you learned while going through this process, that you will be applying to your future projects?
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't apply necessarily to the writing process, but I think the smartest thing I did is I really vetted the crew in an extensive way where, obviously I wanted people who were really talented, but it was just as important to me that I was surrounded by really nice people who were going to work their asses off, because as a first-time director, I just needed people whose number one priority was the quality of the film, as opposed to, maybe some people who have been around a while and want to get the day done so they can go home and watch the basketball game or whatever. And so it was a very long process putting together the crew, but once I had the right people in place, like they made my job a lot easier than it could have been. And then in addition to that, what else did I learn? I guess I learned just to, just be really, directing makes you really sympathetic to the whole process of filmmaking, where, there's so many moving parts. And if anyone is being lazy or just dragging their feet in any way, there are some dire consequences. Like, for example, if someone is 30 minutes late to set, that could mean that you now don't have time to get this shot that you've been planning for months. Right. And so, as an actor, I've always tried to be punctual and prepared, but now I go above and beyond to just make sure that I'm doing everything I can to make the director's job as easy as possible, knowing how much they have on their plate.
Right. Yeah. Great. Well, thanks for talking with me, and have a good day.
You too. Hope to talk soon.
All right, bye. All right, and there's the interview. So I hope you got something out of it. I enjoyed listening to Dave Franco talk about his writing process. I thought it was interesting. Before we go, there's something that I want to address that I think is a very important reminder to aspiring screenwriters. It's not meant to be a lecture, but I think it's very relevant to The Rental and Dave Franco, and so I thought it'd be good to talk about it in this video. I watched The Rental a couple days ago, and I do not think that it's a great film. And I think that I would have executed the premise in a very different way. And I want to talk about how you can use films like this to make you a better writer. Watching great films and reading great screenplays is great. It's good. It's very helpful. But the problem is you can't really critique the films that much because they got it right, essentially. You're basically just doing small little adjustments or preferences. So reading a screenplay or watching a film that you don't like or you would have done differently forces you to articulate why you don't like it and how you would have done it differently. And the more you do it, the better you'll be able to articulate these things. If you are able to articulate these things well, you will strengthen your storytelling muscle and your ability to understand story structure and theme and character and all the elements of story. So I think The Rental was that for me, being able to, watch a film that I would have done differently and forcing myself to answer why that was, why I had that reaction. Go watch the film if you want to, or don't. But I think you can use something like this as an exercise for you. And maybe you'll like the film a lot, and then you should be able to explain why you think it works. But yeah, I just wanted to address that for this, after this interview. It's very valuable, I think, still to listen to creators talk about their creations, to understand straight from the source their motivation to write it, what they were trying to do, and how they executed it. So I'll see you guys in a couple days, next week. I got a lot of stuff coming. I hope you enjoyed the interview. Hope you enjoyed that talk. Definitely leave me a comment down below if you sympathize with this, if you've done this before with the film, and I'll talk to you guys later. All right.